Well, let me introduce myself. My name is David Driskill. I graduated back in May of 2014. I was an economics major. I got a bachelor's in business administration. Recently, I've been working on a master's in administrative leadership. When I was in school here, I really tried to make it a point to get involved as I possibly could, in every opportunity that OU had to offer. I was in internships. I was a CCEW intern alongside Lucy Mahaffey, who you heard speak here today. I tried to take classes from some of the greatest professors that the university had to offer, like Dr. Tom Boyd. As cheesy as it sounds, I love school. I was that kid that looked forward to the first day of school. I love everything about school. The atmosphere of learning is just electric to me. I love getting to meet my fellow classmates and getting to meet my teachers and my professors. So that's why what I'm about to tell you next may come as a surprise to some of you here today. And that is that I also played football when I was here. I was a student athlete. And the reason I say that may come as a surprise is because usually there's this common stereotype that's associated with athletes, right? It's that they're not as invested in their education, and they're at their university for one reason alone, and that is to play their respective sport. And in my time here, I've come to find that couldn't be further from the truth. I have met some of the most incredible people that I have ever met in my entire life as my fellow student athletes. A lot of people who are a lot more qualified to be up here speaking to you today, more so than I am. I've had fellow teammates that have been student speakers at graduation, that have studied abroad. They figure out a way to study abroad with their hectic schedules. I've had teammates that are incredibly talented musically. They can sing, they can dance, they can play all sorts of instruments. So that's why the problem I want to address today really hits close to home to me, because I've seen this incredible potential to solve a lot of the world's problems, off the field and in the classroom, and more importantly in the community. And the bigger problem I want to talk about is that a lot of student athletes aren't necessarily prepared for life when their playing careers are over. And this is a three-part issue. The first part is the NCAA. The next is the athletic advisors from the colleges and universities. And finally, and most importantly in my mind, it's the student athletes. And I want to look at some rules and regulations that have been put into place by the NCAA, which have really negatively affected the way that athletic advisors can advise their student athletes. Back in 2003, the NCAA instituted what they call the 40-60-80 rule. This rule was put into place simply to eliminate floundering on behalf of the student athletes. And when I say floundering, I mean when student athletes weren't taking classes towards the degree and they were only taking them to simply remain eligible to play. Along with the 40-60-80 rule, the NCAA also heightened the punishment for athletic departments who weren't keeping their student athletes on track in terms of progress towards degree completion. These new punishments consisted of things like loss of practice time, loss of scholarships, and most severely possible postseason play ban. So for football, that would mean no bowl game. And these rules ultimately have had some really negative results. What you're seeing are a lot of students who are ultimately set up for failure. It's really difficult for them to navigate through difficult degrees as they move along and get into their more challenging and more tough classes as their curriculum moves forward. So what's happening is a lot of academic advisors are now more incentivized to steer student athletes towards majors where they know they're going to be eligible to play. And this has resulted in what are known as major clusters. Now, a cluster is simply where 25% or more of an athletics team can be found in one major. So if you take men or women's basketball and there are 15 players and 10 to 12 of them are communication majors, then that would be a major cluster. Now, I want to point something out. I'm not trying to offend anybody in any certain major whatsoever. The issue with the cluster is that these majors are typically representative of not the student athlete's first choice as to what they want to study when they got to college. And it's really difficult to become motivated to learn and to want to learn when you're not taking anything that doesn't interest you whatsoever. That's part of the problem that you're seeing in a lot of student athletes who aren't really taking ownership of their education. Another issue is not only are student athletes being told what to major in, but also they're being told really how to live on a day-to-day, almost minute-to-minute basis. I want to walk you through the typical life of a football player in the fall, but I also want you to keep in mind that this isn't just the football player that I'm talking about. I could also be talking about the basketball player, the track athlete, and the rower across all sports. So typically in the fall, the football player will wake up about 5:30. He'll have workouts in the morning. After workouts, he'll go to breakfast. At breakfast, he's usually told, what to eat, how much to eat. After breakfast, he'll have a day of classes. After those classes are over, he'll go to meetings before practice. Those meetings are usually from about 1:45 till 3:30. After those meetings, He'll have the actual practice itself from about 3:30 till 5:30. After that, he has to go to dinner. Both those meals, breakfast and dinner, are mandatory. After dinner, he'll have some type of learning specialist, some type of mentor, some type of tutor that he'll have to attend. So by the end of the day, that's about 8:30, 9 o'clock. So from 5:30 till 9 o'clock, the student-athlete's day is entirely planned out for them. And this exponential growth and structure has actually had some negative effects. What it does is it really robs student-athletes of the quintessential college experience of learning time management. You're not learning time management when all your time is being managed for you. It's really creating a lot of dependent thinkers. And, part of college is learning to think independently. It's almost like this assembly line that you can fall into, and at the end of a 4 or 5 year experience, you can pop out of and have no idea what's going on or what has just happened to you. A general question that can be asked is, okay, so at what point can we really start to take away all the structure and really empower the student athletes, on the general basis? And the consensus answer you would get would be that you can't, because a lot of athletic departments aren't willing to take that risk. The student athlete represents an investment of a lot of time and energy and money. And a lot of athletic departments aren't willing, for their own sake, because of the penalties that are associated with it, they're not willing to allow the student athletes the possibility of failing. If you were to ask your football player at the end of his 4 or 5 year career how many times he's actually enrolled himself, actually gone in and enrolled and looked up classes and talked to fellow students about which professors to take and what times are greatest and all that, he'll tell you that 0. He's never enrolled himself one time. And that really robs somebody of one of the greatest aspects of the college experience, finding out what's out there, what classes are great. So I've talked a lot about these issues and the rules that kind of cause them, but I think that as student athletes we can do a lot to take ownership of this problem, because it all comes back to us. I had the really unique and incredible experience of being a walk-on here, and it's an experience that I am so thankful to have had. And it taught me a lot of things about just life in general, and it taught me to approach life a certain way. And now when I talk about approaching life like a walk-on, I'm talking about that mindset that you see walk-ons having. It's that mindset of tenacity and of toughness, but most importantly, it's of open-mindedness. For me, when I was trying to walk on here, I had to communicate with so many people simply in order to have the opportunity to even make the football team. And that's the way I really try to approach my education. I try and branch out as much as I possibly can with all the different types of people on campus, all the different groups that are on campus, to find the opportunities that are out there. And I think that as student athletes, it's important that we can sometimes have this separate college experience, completely separate college experience from what other students are getting. And I think that it's important that we take the initiative as ourselves to get more involved and to really wake up to a lot of the opportunities that are out there. And finally, I think it's important that student athletes take a stand. A student athlete shouldn't let a 5-minute advising meeting completely deter them away from something that they've dreamed of being for their entire life. My dad used to always tell me, he said, "David, the greatest gift I can ever give you is an education." And that's exactly true. That's the greatest gift that anybody can ever receive, to be able to stand here and give a TED Talk, to be able to sit in here and to listen to TED Talks. That is something that should never, ever be taken for granted. And it's something that as student athletes we need to realize we exchange athletic ability for an education. And that education is ours. It's something that we need to take ownership of and really fully invest in. These solutions that I'm talking about, approaching life open-mindedly and really taking a stand for what you believe in, those are solutions that we can use to not only solve, the problem of how student athletes can address their education, but also, how we can solve a lot of problems in the world today. So thank you.